Imagine paying dues to keep your neighborhood beautiful, only to have the HOA president kick in your front door while you're standing next to the state's top cop. What would you do? My name's Rex Holloway. And, this is how a quiet lake cabin, a pushy HOA, and a woman named Karen turned my life inside out. 3 years back, after the dust of my divorce finally settled, I moved into my grandfather's old cabin at Lakeshore Pines, Michigan. Not a mansion, just a cedar-scented refuge, sitting on a little over 2 acres of woods and water. Grandpa built it with his own hands after Korea. The kind of place where the dock boards still hold summer memories, and the stone fire ring smells like cinnamon and smoke every fall. You could run your fingers over hand-hewn beams and still catch a whisper of Old Spice and sawdust. That was my piece. Enter Karen Whitfield. Karen is, how do I say it? The human version of a paper cut that won't heal. Late 50s. Ironed khakis, sharp enough to slice a tomato. A bright white crossover, with HOA official slapped on the bumper like a sheriff's star. Clipboard welded to her palm. Measuring tape on her belt like it's Excalibur. She bullied her way into being president in under 2 years by promising to protect property values. The day after she won, she started treating people like property. Bird feeders, vermin attractants. The Vietnam vet's flagpole, 3 inches too tall. Martha's Memorial wind chimes, noise pollution. The rules weren't rules. They were weapons, and Karen, he knew how to swing them. She had a special interest in my place. The cabin sat on the choicest slice of lakefront. Built long before the HOA even existed. First time Karen came by, she didn't say hello. She slid a courtesy notice through my screen door and announced 47 violations in a voice that could peel paint. My dock, she said, was 3 feet too long. My fire pit was an unpermitted combustion structure. The cedar canoe rack, unapproved accessory improvement. The bill was $500 up front, plus $75 a day until I complied. I told her the cabin predated the HOA by decades, and the deed said so. Karen smiled without her eyes and said, "Previous ownership is irrelevant. Mr. Holloway, all properties within our jurisdiction must comply, regardless of construction date. You have 30 days before we file a lien." She said lien like a promise and spelled it wrong in her notice lien. Funny. If it wasn't a threat. That night, I drove to the county courthouse and started digging. Ledgers. Deeds. Old plats. I mean paper so brittle it crackled. What I found made my hands shake. The HOA incorporation had been filed a few months after Grandpa died. And someone had, according to the papers I pulled, pasted his signature onto a petition for consent. The developer's son, a current board member, was listed as the witness, not some clerical oopsie. A scheme, proving it would take time, evidence, patience, and a plan better than Karen's petty tyranny. A week later, at dawn, Karen rolled up with a surveyor and Dale Pritchard, the local tire guy who, honest, looked like he wanted to sink into the lake. They marched the property lines like an invasion. Karen barked. The surveyor snapped photos through my windows. Which, yeah, was creepy. Luckily, I had installed security cameras the night before. Every minute recorded. Legal. Clear. Later, over a burger at Murphy's Diner, I learned from a friend that Dale owed a pile of back taxes, and Karen's old insurance license had once been pulled over irregularities. Hypocrisy thick enough to spread with a butter knife. Then the surveyor Jimmy found me in the parking lot and muttered that Karen had underpaid him and pressured him to invent violations. "Help me get my money back, and I'll testify," he said, eyes darting like a rabbit's. He was nervous enough that is way with malinition. I believed him. The very next day, my camera caught Jimmy relieving himself behind my shed. Not a felony. Just foul. When Karen heard, she tried to report it as a health code disaster of unprecedented scale. "Sure," I told her, "but you'll need to explain to the county why you hired him." She didn't like that. By then, Karen had slapped me with a lawsuit worth many thousands and was pushing to shut down my dock pending compliance. She yapped at Murphy's that I was a dangerous, unstable veteran. That wasn't just mean. In my lawyer's opinion, it was defamation, and it padded a pattern of harassment I was documenting like a man possessed. Every photo, every message, every bogus violation. Karen thought she was tightening the noose. All she was doing was sewing herself a legal straitjacket. That's when I hired Stella Crawford out of Grand Rapids. Steel in her eyes, coffee in her veins, and a grin that made bullies blink. "Michigan's got private attorney general statutes," she explained. "When you uncover systematic fraud, you can sue on behalf of everyone harmed. And because your cabin predates the HOA, you've got a solid argument. Their rules don't attach to you at all. We filed a counterclaim fraudulent formation, elder abuse of the folks she targeted, harassment, and more." At the next HOA meeting, Dale blurted in front of the whole board that the HOA paperwork was sketchy from day one. The room went silent. Karen's knuckles went white around her clipboard. For the first time, I saw fear. Neighbors started coming out of the woodwork. Martha, who'd been forced to dig up her rose bushes after 40 years of marriage because they weren't on the approved pallet. Tom, an Afghanistan vet, who said, almost whispering, he'd never been more scared of anyone than he was of Karen. The young couple fined over their toddler's chalk drawings on the driveway. One by one, people connected the dots. Karen wasn't protecting values. She was squeezing the vulnerable and calling it order. And instead of backing off, Karen escalated. Daily drive-bys, nighttime stakeouts in her crossover, crouched behind my shrubs at 9 p.m. like a cartoon spy, calls to my mortgage company through her brother-in-law at the bank, anonymous environmental complaints. She even tried to bribe the county inspector, allegedly then called my ex-wife to whisper that I was unstable. A teenager later admitted Karen paid him to dump motor oil near my dock. My cameras saw the kid's shaky hands and Karen's gloves. Meanwhile, Stella and I followed the money, 60-something thousand missing from the HOA reserve, siphoned into a management company that, funny thing, had never managed a single property. The owner, Karen, through an LLC so thin you could see daylight through it. That cash, from what we could piece together, propped up her son's failing restaurant and put a dent in casino markers. Then my camera caught Karen at 11 at night tossing a bag near my septic field. By sunrise, the county hotline got an anonymous complaint about rotten sewage odors. When the inspector arrived, he found seasoned fish fry from Murphy's, still in the takeout sack. Karen stood there in pink gardening gloves, the kind that look cute on a catalog cover. Her face went the color of skim milk. The surveyor's brother, Danny, some part-time investigator, handed me recordings of Karen telling him, plain as day, find something or make it up. You'll get a bonus if it sticks. Both brothers agreed to testify. The web Karen spun started collapsing under its own weight. Desperate people do reckless things. Karen filed a police report claiming I threatened her with military skills, which is not even a thing. The officer watched the footage, flipped through my binder of dates and screenshots, and said, "Keep documenting." He knew. Everyone knew. But knowing and proving are cousins, not twins. Then Channel 7 rolled up. Karen had tipped them that a dangerous veteran was terrorizing a tranquil lakeside community. I opened my door, poured coffee, and walked the reporter through the mountain deeds, footage, neighbor statements, auditor notes. The piece aired that night. Not the smear Karen pitched, but what it really was, an HOA horror show where the rules were used like brass knuckles. Calls started flooding the newsroom. Victims from other subdivisions. Similar patterns. Same kind of president. Same tricks. The Attorney General's office took notice. They bumped up a meeting with me sooner rather than later. Our coffee club of neighbors got organized. Shared files. And, frankly, found our courage. We set up a little defense fund at the hardware store because lawyers aren't cheap and justice, turns out, has receipts. And then I found the key in Grandpa's old trunk. Beneath his medals and letters lay the original deed from 1960. The boundary line ran a clean 40 feet farther than the revised plat Karen loved to wave around, right under her rose garden and gazebo. On paper, my land. The morning the Attorney General came to the cabin felt like a storm about to break. Not thunder. Exactly. Pressure. The kind that makes birds go quiet. A.G. Monroe calm. Steady. Sleeves rolled, stepped into my kitchen, and shook my hand like we were about to build a barn. We were joined by a deputy from the white-collar unit. A woman with a legal pad and the kind of eyes that miss nothing. We set out the deed. The corporate filings. The bank statements. The screenshots. The videos. The neighbor affidavits. It covered the table. It covered my hope, too. I ain't gonna lie, I was scared of being wrong. We were mid-sentence when the front door didn't knock. It exploded. Karen stormed in, tape measure in one hand, clipboard in the other, shouting about immediate compliance before she even looked up. She had a printed violation for my improper curtain color. I guess beige wasn't beige enough. She froze when she saw the badges. A.G. Monroe didn't flinch. In a voice like a level line, she said, "Ma'am, you have just entered this property without consent during an ongoing law enforcement meeting. Please step outside. We will discuss your conduct in a moment." Karen's face drained to sheet white. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish pulled out of cold water. For once, she had no script. Out on the porch, I could see neighbors pause mid-rake. Word travels fast along a lake. Karen tried to recover, sputtering about community standards and dangerous veterans. Monroe raised a hand. "You're entitled to counsel," she said. "But you need to understand the seriousness of what we're looking at." In that breath, I knew the tide had turned. Not because Karen was scared, because the state saw us. Within a week, subpoenas flew like leaves. Bank records, vendor contracts, board minutes. The HOA's accounting software coughed up transactions to Karen's shell company and a second one that, get this, rented party equipment. The invoices were for seasonal decor. The amount would have decorated a hotel. The board started splintering. A treasurer, gray-haired and soft-spoken, knocked on my door with a folder and tears in his eyes. "I thought we were helping the neighborhood," he said. "Then I saw the transfers." He gave a statement. "So did Martha. So did Tom. So did Jimmy and Danny." Even Dale stood up straighter. Karen went into overdrive. She called an emergency meeting and tried to vote me into special enforcement. She sent urgent alerts about my supposed threats. She cornered Martha by the mailboxes and hissed that Martha's garden was a liability event. She followed Tom's truck at night, taillights glowing red in his rear view, until he pulled into his driveway and stared her down. She kept pushing where people hurt. Stella filed motions. The judge stern. Fair. With a candy bowl on the bench, read them, and granted an injunction: no more late-night stakeouts. No more surprise inspections. No contact with my mortgage. No more fines until the formation challenge was heard. Karen looked like someone had unplugged her. Meanwhile, an auditor dug into the reserve fund. The hole was deeper than we thought. The line items for consulting and seasonal decor and compliance logistics added up to a number that made my stomach drop. The money trail didn't meander. It marched. News spread. Channel 7 came back. So did a podcaster with a mic the size of a fist, and a YouTuber who grinned like Christmas morning. "Tell it like you'd tell your neighbor," he said. So I did. Simple. Straight. With the cracks in my voice right where they lived. And neighbors from other states wrote in same playbook. Different names. The comments weren't just sympathy. They were a map of how bullies operate when nobody pushes back. It wasn't all righteous fire. Some nights, I sat on the end of the dock with coffee gone cold and wondered if I was ruining my daughter's chance at a calm semester. My ex called worried about legal fees and tuition. "What if you lose?" she asked. "I can't let Grandpa's place get turned into a trophy on somebody's bulletin board," I said. "And I can't let Karen do this to the next guy." The next morning, a kid no older than 19 walked up the drive with greasy hands and shame in his eyes. "I'm the one who dumped the oil," he said. "Miss Whitfield told me it was for a science test." Then she gave me $50. He handed me the bill back like it burned. We added his statement to the stack. Spring came late that year. Ice clung to the shady edges of the lake like a last stubborn grudge. Court dates were set. Depositions started. Karen arrived to hers in a blazer the color of wealthy denial and tried to smile like a neighbor. Stella slid a transcript across the table. Danny's recording. Karen's eyes flicked to the corner where the red light on the recorder blinked. "Steady as a heartbeat." "Is that your voice?" Stella asked. "I don't recall," Karen said. Stella pressed play. "Find something or make it up. You'll get a bonus if it sticks." Karen's voice filled the room. The court reporter didn't move. You could have heard a thread snap. Karen tried to pivot. To blame the culture of the board. To mutter about protecting values. But the facts stayed facts. The pre-HOA deed. The funny money. The gloves. The late-night fish fry. The teen with the crumpled bill. The neighbors who had, finally, stopped whispering and started signing their names. I ain't a perfect man. I've got a temper that tries to light up when cornered. But Stella's hand on my sleeve kept me steady. "Let the paper speak," she whispered. "Let the tape speak. Let the truth breathe." That weekend, we held a backyard potluck we called Kind of Joking. Kind of, not the Lakeshore Commons. Fold-out tables. Crockpots. Kids with chalk that no one scolded. Tom set up a casting practice for vets using old spark plug weights. Martha taught people to start roses from cuttings. We passed around a mason jar we turned into a community fund. Folks dropped in 5s and 10s and even IOUs. It wasn't about the money. It was about breaking Karen's spell. The one that makes people think you can't stand up to a clipboard. A day later, a process server knocked on Karen's door at sunrise. The state had moved from looking to charging. Financial crimes. Harassment. A conspiracy count that, in my opinion, fit like a glove. The board's developer's son lawyered up. Dale gave a full proffer. The treasurer resigned in a letter that made the rounds on social media. The comments were raw and honest and, sometimes, mean. I told folks to aim their anger at systems and choices, not faces. We weren't out here to crush a human. We were here to stop harm. Karen doubled down again. She stood on the corner with a bullhorn and shouted about outsiders and unpatriotic behavior. She tacked up flyers about a dangerous veteran. She called Channel 7 and begged for a redo. They declined. On a Tuesday, the judge heard our formation challenge. Stella walked him through the deed history like a hike on a well-marked trail. She showed how the HOA's footprint had, over the years, shifted like a tide line, always in the direction of nicer views and thicker wallets. She showed Grandpa's signature that didn't match the old hunting license on file. The capital letters drawn like a person who never met him, trying to look official. The judge leaned back, tapped his pen, and asked one question that, to me, mattered most. What would this community look like without fear? He took it under advisement. But I could feel something moving. The morning of the raid, I was sanding a porch step that had splintered after winter. A pair of unmarked sedans rolled slow down the lane, followed by a county cruiser. They didn't blast sirens. They didn't strut. They simply parked, stepped out, and knocked on Karen's front door with the kind of knock that says, "This is happening." Karen came out with her chin set like poured concrete. She tried to turn it into theater hands sweeping toward her rose garden, eyes wide for the neighbors. But the agents were business. A clipboard, ironic. Wright held the warrant. They moved in calm as surgeons. Word spread down the lake in seconds. People lined the road. Not gloating. Not cheering. Just watching, like they were waking from a long, bad dream. I felt sad, angry, relieved, tired deep in my bones. By noon, Karen was led to a car. No perp walk. No years. Just the squeak of a door and the heavy click of responsibility catching up. The same afternoon, the judge issued an order dissolving the HOA, at least the version that had been formed off sketchy filings and overreach. He appointed a receiver. Restitution hearings were set. He barred Karen from serving on any board that managed other people's money. The ruling landed like a clean breath. When I got back to the cabin, a rectangle lay on my gravel drive. Karen's clipboard. Abandon it. A cracked crown. I picked it up and set it on the porch. A neighbor I barely knew walked over and said, "You did it, Rex." I shook my head. "We did it," I said, and I meant it. That evening, I met A.G. Monroe at the diner. She ordered meatloaf and coffee. I asked her what made it click. "Patterns," she said. "Bullies think they're unique. They're not. But communities are. You all chose to link arms." We talked about restitution, how the older couples who had been squeezed could get some relief. About rehabilitating a neighborhood that had been trained to flinch. About how to rebuild without replacing one clipboard with another. Summer came soft. We tore out the old approved palette chart and used the frame for a community chalkboard. Tuesday nights became potluck nights. Tom led fishing trips for vets on Saturdays. Martha started a memorial garden by the new mailbox cluster, wind chimes encouraged. The young couple painted a hopscotch grid across their driveway. And the whole street played. We turned Karen's old rose garden, turns out. PR the deed. It was on my side of the line into a community compost bin that fed Martha's roses. That felt right. What once lorded over us now nourished us. I started a tiny veterans retreat out of the cabin, 2 bunks. A coffee pot. A rule that nobody had to talk about anything they didn't want to. Martha handles the bookings on a spiral notebook that makes her smile. Dale volunteers tire checks for anyone making a long drive. Jimmy, sobered by his part, comes on Thursdays to mend dockboards and listen more than he talks. My daughter came home from college and sat on the dock with me, toes skimming the water. "I'm proud of you," she said. I felt my throat go tight. "I didn't do it perfect," I said. "But we did it together. Some nights I still wake up at 2 a.m. when a car idles on the lane. Then I remember the late-night stakeouts are over. The porch light is just a porch light again. If there's a moral besides don't weaponize a measuring tape, it's this: rules without neighbors become hammers. And hammers without care turn people into nails. Karen will have her day in court. The state will say it's peace. And so will she. I don't wish her ruin. I wish her a mirror and a long, honest look. What I do wish ruin on is the kind of fear that keeps good people quiet. So, yeah. Imagine your HOA president kicking in your door while you're standing beside the attorney general. Imagine the silence after. Imagine the moment the bully realizes the room is full of grown-ups. That's what happened here. Not overnight. Not clean. But real. Every evening now. I sit on the end of the dock, with a mug warm in my hands, and watch the light turn the lake into a sheet of soft gold. You know, there's people who think standing up is about the fight. Sometimes it's about the after. The garden replanted. The chalk lines on a driveway. The wind chimes a widow hears when she waters the roses. What would you do if your HOA nightmare landed on your porch? Has a clipboard ever tried to run your life? Drop your story in the comments. Somebody out there needs your courage today.